Praise the Lord, saints. I am Deacon Michael Buck. For more than 30 years, I've been a devoted member of Peace Apostolic Church. My wife and I raised our kids in this church, and more than 20 years ago, Pastor Swansea appointed me a deacon of the church. Behind me are other members of Peace Apostolic Church's deacon board.
Praise the Lord, saints. My name is Minister John Gonzales. I've been a member of Peace Apostolic since 1992, and I am a minister. I too am a devoted member of this church's congregation. My wife and I raised our 3 kids in the church, and I serve as the men's baptismal president, and I'm an instructor with the new members Sunday school class. I have also served in other leadership roles in the church.
During morning service last Sunday, Sister Tamara Prince spoke from the pulpit about a lawsuit that was recently filed against the church's administration, Sister Prince and Sister Priscilla Brown, and the church itself. We come before you today to tell you that we, Minister Gonzales and I, filed the suit. And we've come before you today to explain why.
For the last 15 years of Pastor Swansea's life, I've had the privilege and the honor of being his personal driver. During the many hours we spent traveling together, Pastor Swansea shared with me his thoughts on spirituality, on family, and on the church. And he explained to me his hopes for the church should the Lord take him before the rapture. And one thing he made very clear to me is that the church belongs to the people, and that the church's members, that's you and I, have a say-so in how the church is run.
I too spent time with Pastor during my 30 years at the church. He provided guidance and insight to me and others, and he shared with his views of God, family, and the church. And when he appointed me to be on the deacon board, I took my responsibility seriously. Pastor Swansea was entrusting me with a mission to ensure that the church remained committed to shepherding the flock and walking in the right path. Down through the years, Pastor Swansea consulted with me and the other church deacons about the church, about how the church should be run. And he explained to us that he had taken steps to ensure that the church was well taken care of if he should pass away or no longer be able to serve as pastor. He explained that he had a plan for his succession and that he had even picked out certain names for potential successors to the role of pastor. He also mentioned some of the strengths and weaknesses of certain candidates.
For the nearly 30 years that Deacon Buck and I have been members of this church, Pastor Swansea worked together with the church's members and its leaders, including Deacon Buck and the other members of the deacon board, and that was to run the church. Pastor Swansea made sure the church's leadership, including myself and the deacons, had access to the church at all times, so we could assist Pastor in doing the important work of the church.
When Pastor Swansea passed away unexpectedly on January 10th of this year, we, like all of you, were brokenhearted. Pastor Swansea represented the best of us, and his passing was a huge loss on both a personal and institutional level. As deacons, it is our duty to ensure that the church continues to serve God and the congregation despite the pastor's passing. Many members of the church asked the deacons what we were doing to assist the church following Pastor Swansea's death and to make sure that the church remained strong. So the deacon board reached out several times to Sister Priscilla Brown to ask for a meeting to discuss the church's plans for Pastor Swansea's succession and to discuss church matters. We asked to sit down with the church's administration so that we could offer our support to the church during this period of transition. Our request for a meeting and our follow-up emails, text messages, and letters were ignored.
The church's response, or lack of response, to the deacon board's earnest request to assist were concerning. What's more, the very day after Pastor Swansea passed away, the church's administration changed the locks on the church so that my keys and the keys of the deacons no longer worked. So we hired counsel to help us evaluate our options. As a nonprofit organization, the church members and directors have the right to see certain church records. Through our council, we made a written request to review the church's records.
The response we received from the church left us flabbergasted. Despite our decades of service to the church and despite Pastor Swansea's repeated statements that the church belonged to us, the members of the church, we were told that we were not members or directors of the church and that we had no right to see church records. The church explained that there were only 2 people with a right to make decisions about the church or even view the church records, Sister Tamara Prince and Priscilla Brown. The church said that no one else, not even members like Minister Gonzales or the deacons standing behind me, who had devoted decades worth of time and energy to bettering the church, had a right to review even the most basic of the church records.
For over a month, through our council, we asked the church to give us the bylaws of the church so that we could determine whether the church administrators were correct that the church has no members. We explained that without being allowed to see the church's bylaws, we would be forced to go to court to get a copy of the bylaws through the civil discovery process. Time and again, we asked the church and the administration to show us the bylaws, and each time they flatly refused.
We feel hurt by the church's response, and the administration's refusal to be transparent left us concerned about their decisions. These are not allegations we take lightly, and it saddens us that we have had to air our concerns in the course of a lawsuit rather than discussing them privately like we wanted to do from the start.
There is a larger coalition of church leaders who support our efforts to obtain the bylaws. And while we all support these efforts, none of us desire to go to court. We give you this background so that you can better understand why we felt we had no other option except to pursue this course of action.
After Pastor Swansea passed away, the deacons offered to help the church administration with our transition. And in turn, we reached out to request their assistance so that the deacons could fulfill the role the pastor appointed us to perform.
But they were ignored.
We hired counsel and through our attorney made legal requests to review corporate records. That request was denied.
We then repeatedly asked the church administrations to show us the church's bylaws so that we could understand where they were coming from. Each request was denied.
This is not the first time that members of the deacon board had addressed the congregation to explain the steps that the deacons had taken to ensure that the church would remain strong during the transition following Pastor Swansea's death. In early April, a few deacons posted a video explaining just that.
And the church responded with a cease and desist letter, misquoting the deacons' words and stating that their earnest attempt to fulfill their duties as deacons was defamation against the church.
So we were left with no choice but to go to court so that through the civil discovery process, we can get the documents we need to ensure that the church members, you all, and the church directors, the deacon board, can play a part in choosing a new pastor and keeping the church strong for decades to come.
Despite what Sister Prince said from the sacred space of the pulpit on Sunday, the lawsuit is not about the actions of our beloved Pastor Swansea. We have never questioned Pastor Swansea's character nor his ability to be transparent with the congregation.
Pastor Swansea shepherded his flock with the utmost integrity, and in no way is our lawsuit an indictment against the pastor, whom we love on a personal and spiritual level.
We have concerns, though, that the current administration of the church has not been forthright with the congregation and has not been following in Pastor Swansea's path or in the line with his example and vision for the church.
We hope and pray that this unfortunate situation can and will be resolved quickly without further legal action. Our invitation to work together with the church's administration to resolve this dispute remains open.
But until that happens, all we can do is pray, stay the course, and follow the path that Pastor Swansea showed us. Thank you.